The National Association of Realtors got sued, and there's a proposed settlement on the table. Here are the key changes that you need to know as the consumer. My name is Claudia Muniz, and I'm a Central New Jersey real estate agent. Today, we're going to cover the NAR lawsuit, the National Association of Realtors lawsuit, the proposed settlement changes that will shake up how we currently do business, and what that means for you as the consumer. If you haven't heard already, the National Association of Realtors got sued for the conspiracy of price fixing and setting higher commissions across all of the real estate companies. So for any agent who's ever said, well, the standard commission rate is X, that is why the National Association of Realtors got sued. So now moving forward, there's a proposed settlement on the table, and it's supposed to go into effect mid-August 2024. The proposed changes, the two big ones would be, number one, if any buyer wants to tour a property, they need to have a written representation agreement with a buyer's agent. No longer can you just call up an agent on Zillow and say, okay, I'd like to tour this property without a written agreement. The next big thing is that there will be no advertisement of buyer agent commissions in the multiple listing service. So the way it stands right now, the buyer agent commission is listed in the MLS. So the assumption is that if a property was offering a lower buyer agent commission, agents across the board would conspire to not show that property because they weren't going to be compensated what is considered a full commission. So now with the proposed changes, we're removing that from the MLS. So in order to find out if a seller is offering a buyer agent commission, the buyer agent will need to get in contact with the listing agent, find that out. So what this means for you as the consumer. So if you are getting ready to buy a home, you may want to do more research into your agent or into a potential agent before you make the decision to start looking at properties. Now, there are still a lot of logistics to figure out with this. Like, if I just want to see a house with an agent, do I have to commit to them for a long period of time? Not necessarily. There are agreements that would only tie you to that agent for that specific property showing. But again, there's still a lot of logistics to figure out with this. So that's one solution. So you can still date the agent instead of having to marry them right away. But for you as the consumer, I would do a lot more research up front. So you're not having to test out that many agents. You can do your research up front, have a consultation with them, and decide if they make sense for you. So that's one thing I've actually already started implementing in my business as we anticipate these changes to happen over the next couple months, is where I would usually do a buyer consultation just to get to know the people more and to get to know what they're looking for a little bit more. Now I'm also going into what my services are, what I do a little bit differently than some other agents. And then at the end of that consultation, we'll decide if we're a good fit to work together, and we'll sign the agreement at that point. The other big change would be the commission being advertised in the MLS. Now, what this means for buyers is that if a seller is offering no compensation to the buyer's agent and you've hired a buyer's agent, that means that you would be responsible for their compensation. Now, there are ways that we can then negotiate this for the seller to pay, and it's going to really depend on like what other offers there are, what the pricing is. There's still a lot to figure out with this, because logically, if the seller is not offering a buyer agent commission and now the buyer is having to compensate their own agent, it would make sense that now the buyer will be offering less money for the property, because in the past, the homes were priced with that compensation being factored in already. So now if that compensation is not being factored in, the buyer has to pick it up. Well, the seller should expect a lower price for their home. So obviously this hasn't been put into place yet, so we don't know what the effects will be. And maybe in some very competitive markets, there won't be too much of an effect on the pricing. But as of now, we do expect that for sellers that do not offer a buyer agent commission, they're likely to lose out on the price of their home. And in fact, on some of the buyer representation agreements, there is a section where the buyer can opt out of seeing any homes that would require them to compensate their agent. So, buyers can already say up front, hey, look, I don't have the finances for the down payment, closing costs, and to compensate my agent, but my agent should be compensated for helping me through this process. So I'm only willing to look at houses that will take care of that for me. And it makes sense. if there's a lot of buyers in that same mindset, the sellers can expect less money for their home. Now, in terms of, let's say the seller is not offering compensation, they won't let you negotiate it into the price, but you still want to move forward with this home. I'm working really closely with my lender to see what that looks like if you were to factor in that compensation into your mortgage and what that would look like on your monthly payments. So that is also an option that's becoming available. I get this a lot too. What if I, as a buyer, just go direct to the listing agent? Well, the listing agent has to have an agreement with the seller for what's called a dual agent compensation. And not every state allows for dual agency, but here in New Jersey, we do. So part of some of the logistics to be figured out is that legally, as real estate brokers, we can only be compensated by one party. So we can't receive compensation from the buyer and seller. It's just one. So if we are representing both the buyer and seller, the listing agent then has to make a decision if they didn't already agree with the seller up front about dual agency commission, if they're going to work for free on the buyer side. So now the likelihood of somebody doing twice the amount of work for half the pay, I would say is low. We're really not sure how this is going to play out. I mean, are people going to do double the work for half the price? I guess we will find out. I mean, there's always going to be discount brokers out there, right? But generally, the consensus is that you get what you pay for, right? So we'll see what happens with that. So moral of the story is that as the consumer, I would do a lot more research up front. Research about who you want as your agent and if they align with your goals and how you want this real estate journey to go for you. And then also research about if you are buying a home, what that looks like in terms of compensating your agent, and if you want to consider homes that will put you in the position to compensate your agent. So that's on the buyer side. On the seller side, you're going to be looking at, am I offering a buyer agent commission? And if so, what does that look like? Am I offering a dual agency compensation? And what does that look like? And what are the pros and cons of that in terms of the types of offers I'm going to get? And if I'm going to maximize the prices of the offers on my home by offering the compensation or not. So these are the big changes to look out for on the consumer side. As always, if you would like to have a consultation with me about your specific situation and see what makes the most sense, feel free to book an appointment with me on my calendar, and I'll be looking forward to speaking with you. If you've enjoyed this content and I've earned your subscription, go ahead and hit that bell, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you.